And without any further ado.
Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to introduce Assemblywoman Holly Schepisi. Holly was first elected to the New Jersey General Assembly in November 2011, representing the 39th Legislative District. A strong advocate for the residents of her district and the state, Assemblywoman Schepisi is the leading proponent for local issues such as efforts to retain businesses, finding remedies for disproportionate funding issues, provide solutions to flooding, or as the loyal opposition to attempts at increasing taxes. She has continued to work to strengthen the rights of crime victims, provide mandatory treatment for non-violent drug offenders, enhance transparency in medical billing, protect drinking water from drug contamination, and deny bail to dangerous offenders. Newark Star-Ledger newspaper named Assemblywoman Schepisi as one of their top 9 to watch, noting that she is well liked by Republicans and as well as Democrats. She is well positioned to rise in the future. She was also named the 2014 Outstanding Woman in Government Award. The Assemblywoman is special counsel at the law firm of Huntington Bailey, LLP, where she practices governmental law, corporate law, land use, employment matters, criminal defense, and structured finance. Without any further ado, please give a warm welcome to Assemblywoman.
And thank you so much for having me here tonight. This is an incredibly complicated issue that communities all over the entire state are grappling with. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democratic issue. This is an all of us issue. And tonight I'm going to try to educate to a certain extent, because even amongst my colleagues in the legislature, many of them admit to me that touching this issue is akin to touching the third rail with both hands. It's complicated. It's something that involves a long history of court rulings. You have to be somewhat wonky to understand it because you're dealing with numbers and weird calculations and planners and a whole host of people that most people don't understand. You're dealing with very powerful interests in the state who have a vested interest in seeing things remain the status quo. And as I found out, God forbid you speak out on the fact that this really isn't working for anybody, including those who need affordable housing the most. You get called a whole slew of wonderful names that you never knew you were. And so tonight, I'm going to speak a little bit about my background and how I got involved in this issue, as well as essentially you're going to hear about how we as a state, how we as West Windsor and surrounding communities got here and where we are today, the inequities and challenges that our communities are facing and why, the categories of people who actually need affordable housing, and how we're actually failing them because the current system doesn't work, how school funding and pilot agreements, many in this room may not know what a pilot agreement is, but how those two issues are actually further perpetuating the fact that we will never be able to have affordable housing because of our property taxes and the way that our property taxes are currently structured. And finally, what can you, as a citizen, as an elected official, as somebody who actually cares, what can you do? Because after I give the speech and talk about some of these things, a lot of people candidly get depressed. And even my own mother, who came to a luncheon that I had had, who listened to this for the first time, she goes, oh dear God, I want to move out of New Jersey. You know, what can I do? And so the good news is there are things that we can do on a bipartisan level that we need to start reaching across the aisle, putting aside some of the labels and figuring out how we can still save the state while we have time to do so. So, a little bit about me and how I got involved and how I became passionate on this. I'm a lawyer. I'm a mom. I have a 14-year-old. I have a 6-year-old. Actively involved in my community. Do way too much. Can never say no. And went from being a corporate mergers and acquisitions attorney to approximately 12 years ago, got involved with my own municipality, Rivervale, New Jersey. And after helping out with a particularly brutal election, I got asked if I wanted to be the borough attorney. Quite candidly, I knew nothing about what even COA was. And for those who don't know what COA is, it was a Council on Affordable Housing. Had no clue. But I started attending meetings at all of our communities. I started going to the council meetings. I started reading minutes. And I very shortly thereafter became an expert in affordable housing regulations, COA, builder remedy suits, and a whole slew of other terms that you're going to hear today. The town that I live in was one of the bad towns. You know, thumb their nose, said, this is ridiculous. We shouldn't have to build anything we don't want to build. And, you know, state of New Jersey, we're not complying. So as a result, the town had been sued. And the town I live in has 3 major golf courses, lots of land to develop. Really nothing else. We have no corporate, we have no anything. It's a small little town, population 9,000 people. So all of a sudden, they found themselves, as I came on board as the municipal attorney, with all of these builder remedy suits seeking to put thousands of units of housing on parcels of land and trying to potentially convert golf courses into, you know, a 1,200 unit type thing. And we sat down and said, how do we deal with this? Now, the mayor at the time felt that the borough had a moral obligation to actually do something proactive. So he tasked me to do it. We were one of the only communities in the state that went through the entire process. We went out, we aggregated parcels of land that were in foreclosure and bought them and bonded for them. We partnered with the Bergen County Housing Authority to actually build and construct 100% affordable housing complexes. We did the first eminent domain, and you'll hear a lot about eminent domain today as well, first eminent domain transaction of an active golf course to try to preserve the golf course and have a development parcel that the municipality would build upon. We went through mediation. We got challenged by builders. We settled out lawsuits, and we were one of the only communities to get substantial certification for round 3. Now, what does that mean? That means that we were supposed to be protected. We did everything that you could do. And I've handled multi-billion-dollar transactions around the world. It was the most complicated legal transactions I had ever done. It was a system designed to fail. There is no way that communities can actually comply with the way it was structured and set up with COA. And I speak from experience on this, because shortly after we were certified and had our protections, guess what? We got sued in a builder remedy suit. And the community has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years defending itself against this builder remedy suit, as they had actually done everything they were supposed to do. So when I first started thinking about running for office, one of the things that I pledged to do was somehow, some way, change the way that we were doing and pushing these obligations onto our community. And as bad as it was then, we have now hit the Armageddon, disaster for our state. And I'm going to go through with you some of the things and just some of the headlines that I pulled today. These are all from this week, okay? Judge's order for more affordable housing in Princeton ripples across New Jersey. DEP, this is one of the first signs of positive. DEP blocks Lakewood plan that foes fear will double population. And the DEP blocked today a zoning change proposed by Lakewood that would have potentially doubled the population size, which is already doubled to more than 100,000 people. And it's the fifth highest in population among New Jersey municipalities, behind Newark, Jersey City, Paterson, and Elizabeth. And this would have potentially further doubled the community under some of the affordable housing regs. Council passes ordinance to build 72-unit affordable housing development on Shoes Landing. Residents voicing concerns about the project's influence on the township, particularly its encroachment on historic farms. Restrictive covenant poses problem for affordable housing project. This is in Morristown. I've had residents of Morristown reach out to me begging for help because not only is their municipality facing the same challenges that every other municipality is, but private homeowners are being sued by a group, Fair Share Housing, which you'll hear about, trying to force them into a litigation to try to deem that all of various deed restrictions are no longer valid. So people are being dragged in. Emerson, New Jersey, one of the towns I represent, there are currently commercial business owners that have had their businesses 20 years, 30 years, that are being sued and being dragged in and trying to be forced to have their properties be given up pursuant to eminent domain for a for-profit development that has a tiny little set-aside of affordable housing. Here's one. Affordable housing dispute boils over in Atlantic Highlands. Judge rules Delran affordable housing complaint can move forward. Judge sets affordable housing requirement at over 155,000 new units. New wave of residential development will alter West Windsor master plan. Melbourne Planning Board to vote on affordable housing. Pilot approved. Roseland Council adopts 2 20-year pilot agreements with objections. So what does this mean? I represent 23 municipalities, 20 in Bergen, 3 in Passaic, all of which have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in the past several years, money that they don't have, on professional fees. Why? Because the legislature has refused and failed to do its job. And that is why I'm going all around the state talking and educating people. Because we as a legislative body have refused to touch this issue. The courts have touched the issue for us. And because we have refused to put forth legislative initiatives and hold hearings on them and vote on things and do our jobs that we were elected to do, the courts have stepped in and the courts have assumed our duties and obligations in conjunction with a nonprofit that has been given equal power by the courts as if it was a branch of government. So the largest driver of costs result from what's called third-party interveners. And third-party interveners are groups that are developers, nonprofits, and the like that appear And they demand that your community has to build large numbers of affordable housing. Actually, not large numbers of affordable housing, large numbers of market rate units with a tiny little portion of affordable housing in your community to satisfy your obligations. Every community that I've gone to has no issues with providing real affordable housing. People sit, they talk, say, you know what, our seniors need it. The people in our town who are going through an illness, a divorce, a life change, who want to stay in, who have kids in the community, they need it. New Jersey has the largest population of special needs in the entire country. They need it. And then you have generational poverty, which is a whole entirely different class and issue to deal with, that also needs it. But what have we done? Instead of analyzing and figuring out where these various groups need to be and how to be involved in our communities and what makes sense for a senior who has been in your community for 40 years, may make absolutely no sense for a millennial who's just graduating from college, or for the family who is getting divorced and the kids need to stay in the school system, or the person who lives in Asbury Park who has been involved in generation after generation of low-income wages and wants to try to have something better for their children. But what we've done is we have now said we are going to take a cookie-cutter approach, and it doesn't matter if you're Saddle River, New Jersey, with no public transportation, no means of getting anywhere, no anything, or a transit village that's being redeveloped such as East Orange. And we're going to make Saddle River provide all of these affordable housing units, even though there's no infrastructure, no ability for anybody to get around, or have anything that makes sense. So Fair Share Housing is the nonprofit that's pushing this. And Fair Share Housing has essentially refused to have any open discussion or dialogue regarding the efficacy and what makes sense and what doesn't. And had literally threatened people that if they tried to hold hearings or tried to talk about different ways to do this, that they would have campaigns against them and letters written against them and letters to the editor and a whole host of other things. So before our municipalities got put in the position that West Windsor currently is in, I put forth a couple of bills that said, you know what, let's do our jobs. Let us bring everybody who has a stake in this together at the table. Let's have fair share housing. Let's have our mayors and council. Let's have COA. Let's have the NAACP. Let us have a wide variety of people. Let's have some economists. Let's have lawyers. Let's have planners. And sit down and talk about environmentalists. Sit down and talk about how to properly implement something for our entire state. When the legislature refused to do it, I decided to do it myself. And I started holding hearings. I did one at Bergen Community College up in Bergen County, where I invited everybody. I didn't care if you were a Democrat mayor or a Republican mayor, if you hated affordable housing or loved it. I wanted to hear from everybody. So I invite Fair Share Housing. I had the Bergen County Housing Authority there. I had nonprofits, United Way. I had the River Keeper. You name it, I invited everybody. Rather than attend or call or meet with me, you want to hear the response we got? From whom? Because I think this is very telling as to why nothing has taken place. Dear Assemblywoman Schepisi, I've received the invitation to the meeting you are holding this evening. I do not plan to attend because it is clear to me that you do not intend to have meaningful discussion, but instead will use this as an opportunity to further distort the truth and encourage NIMBYism and xenophobia. It is clear your goal is to attempt to undermine the important work undertaken by municipalities and others, including nonprofits devoted to helping lower-income families and persons with disabilities. New Jersey's fair housing laws ensure that municipalities do not abuse their land use powers by unreasonably interfering with the development of homes for families, seniors, and persons with disabilities. The law requires municipalities to amend their zoning codes to permit development of affordable and market-rate homes so that lower-income persons and families have a fair chance to access jobs, good schools, and other opportunities throughout the state. These laws were not enforced for 16 years, but are now being enforced in trial courts throughout the state. Municipalities have had more than 2 years to plan to meet their housing obligations by, for instance, promoting redevelopment and working with nonprofits such as Habitat for Humanity. Municipalities have $160 million in housing trust funds they can use for this purpose. They have tremendous flexibility, and the law ensures through various statutory provisions that municipalities can meet their obligations without any significant effort. There are 120 municipalities that have agreed to adopt modest changes to their zoning ordinances and created alliances with nonprofit organizations in order to meet their housing obligations. Despite clear evidence to the contrary, the progress that has been made on fair housing has led you to claim that the sky is falling. Many legislators could be forgiven for misunderstanding basics of land use in the Fair Housing Act, but as a land use lawyer who represents developers and municipalities, you have no excuse. You know your statements are demonstrably false and overblown. Your goal is plainly to stoke fear for your own political gain, not to do anything that actually helps any lower-income families or people with disabilities. If you had bothered to ever communicate with me prior to attacking my organization, which we had and I hadn't attacked him, as you have in the newspaper and social media, you would have known that our organization is not taking the position that municipalities must develop hundreds of thousands of new affordable homes by 2025, as you have asserted. Now, we're going to get back to that, okay? We do expect that between 1999 and 2025, there will be hundreds of thousands of new households that need an affordable home. But due to various adjustments permitted by law, the actual number of affordable homes that will be made available and that municipalities must attempt to provide opportunities for through zoning is significantly less. This is commonly known. The truth is that municipalities are only required to provide zoning for a little fraction of the actual need. Your claim that municipalities are being required to provide 280,000 affordable homes is a lie, and you know it. Your claim that a potential total of 1.4 million new homes would be developed is a lie, and you know it. The question I am left with is why you're choosing to lie on such an important issue. I suspect you're looking for political attention and have chosen an approach that exploits the weakest among us. This is not an admirable approach, and I would urge you going forward to speak honestly and to recognize that your constituents are not all NIMBYs such as you. Many of your constituents need affordable homes that, as long as you do not get your way, I am hopeful will be built in the coming years. I will not participate in a political stunt in which you seek to create hysteria, encourage discrimination, and ignore the truth.
Kevin Walsh, Fair Share House.
Now, I am going to read to you a part of the judge's decision on the most recent Superior Court Judge Mary Jacobson's ruling on Thursday, and this goes back to March 10th, that West Windsor and Princeton must allow for greater lower and middle-income housing units is the latest decision in a series of long-running disputes between towns and Fair Share Housing Center. Jacobson's 217-page ruling is particularly significant because she lays out a statewide requirement of 155,000 new affordable housing units through 2025, according to the center. That was with Fair Share Housing seeking almost 300,000 new homes to be built. So when I saw this letter, and I read it again recently, and I went, I'm being told that I'm lying to the public and that municipalities are not being required to provide 280,000 affordable homes. My only thought is, okay, they were seeking 300 instead of 280. But, so how we got here and what we do and how this is all intertwined. The challenges that our communities are facing right now is you have communities that maybe have a total of 3,000 homes in their community that are being told that they have an affordable housing obligation of 600 or 700 homes that need to be affordable. Now, in practical terms, what does that mean? To probably most of your surprise, I actually am an attorney for the Bergen County Housing Authority. I help build 100% affordable housing projects for veterans, for seniors, for special needs, and for families. Because of all the regulation and because of all the red tape and the inane requirements, you cannot build an affordable housing unit that is affordable to build. We are now approaching, in some instances, with all of the other ancillary costs, upwards of $250 a square foot, with soft costs, to build a 600 square foot affordable housing unit. We have made it so difficult because of the layers of regulation that we have put on. Everything has to be green technology. I mean, literally to the type of trash chute that needs to be utilized. The insurance requirements are those that only one or two insurance companies in the entire state even write policies for that sort of thing. And you're talking about, for every person working on the job, having to go out and get $10 million insurance policies for maybe a $3 million project. And so it made it exceptionally difficult for anybody to do 100% affordable housing developments. And our communities are attempting to comply. You have 3,000 people, 3,000 homes in your community. You're told you have to provide 600 units of affordable housing. Well, if you did it pursuant to having private developers come in, that now, at a 5-to-1 ratio, which used to be the norm, now it's like 7 market rate units given to a developer for one affordable housing unit. You are now talking about almost doubling the population size of that community, if not more so, in order to comply. So towns have a proverbial gun to their heads. And I can't tell you how many mayors and council, and reading through this, every single town goes, we are regretfully voting yes. We have no other choice. We don't know what to do. We disagree with this. We hate that this farm is going to go. In a series of bad, different things that could come down to the pike, this is the least bad decision that we could come up with. What's the purpose of having municipalities and zoning laws and master plans and everything else in our community? Things are so crazy that right now, a municipality that wants to fight and says, you know, our infrastructure can't handle this. We don't have septic, we don't have sewer, we don't have water. Our schools are busting at the seams and we're capped out. We don't have roads, we don't have our volunteer police, and not volunteer police, but volunteer fire, volunteer ambulance. We don't have the resources. The courts, as we sit here today, are not permitted to look at any of those considerations. That's one of the bills that I've introduced, real baby steps. Now, in determining what a municipality's obligation should be, these are things that the court should be able to take a look at. And right now, they can't. I'm up in Bergen County. Bergen County is larger than 5 states in the United States, plus the District of Columbia. New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the entire country. And Bergen County is one of the most densely populated counties in the entire country. Every single town around me is being forced to allow 600, 700, 800 unit complexes all at the same time. Our streets right now are single lane. I can't get from my house to my office, which is only a couple of miles away, without it sometimes taking me 12 to 15 minutes. Our public transportation is already at full capacity, and we're being told you have no choice, and you have to do this. Now, where it makes 0 sense is I started looking at population growth and started really looking at what's going on in the state of New Jersey over the past several years. So we're talking about if the number of units that are being discussed were to be built or permitted to be built, you're talking in total, New Jersey being on the hook for over 1 million new homes. 1 million new homes. Now, that equates to 2,500 new homes per community in the state of New Jersey. And that is more than the entire housing supply of Manhattan. All of Manhattan. So, why are we doing this? Do we have massive numbers of people moving into New Jersey? No. Do we have exceptionally high birth rates? Do we have people who are running to come into New Jersey? According to Rutgers, and a population growth study that Rutgers had conducted recently, we have had less than 0.3% population growth over the past several years per year. That population growth is far less than many, many other states. And it's the lowest that the state has seen in years and years and years. So we are now preparing to build units that would assume a 30% population increase in the state, as we're currently only having 0.3% a year. And Rutgers economists predict the average growth to be only 0.3% a year until 2026. That translates into an actual population increase of only 219,000 people. So Last year alone, 13% more people moved out of the state than moved in. So, we're being told to prepare for potentially a population increase of 3.35 million people. 3.35 million people. Unless California actually sinks and everybody who survives wants to move to New Jersey, I don't know where those people are coming from. So where do we get these insane numbers? How are municipalities that only have 2,000 or 3,000 people, or 2,000 or 3,000 residences, being told you've got to build or zone to allow for 600 affordable units? It's a combination of factors. And this is where the state is really broken, and this is where people generally get really upset. So, Jersey City has had an enormous boom. They've had population growth. They're issuing a tremendous number of building permits. They're also issuing a tremendous amount of pilot agreements, payment in lieu of tax agreements, to wealthy developers that are coming in and building and making a fortune all over Jersey City. Jersey City has no affordable housing obligation under the state of New Jersey. Out of 37,500 new building permits issued, there were only a handful of affordable housing units that were built as a feel-good measure, with pilot agreements being given for 30 years and 40 years to incentivize developers to not have to pay full property taxes on the buildings, but they weren't building affordable housing units. However, because the state of New Jersey is special, those units that were being built, although Jersey City didn't have an obligation to build those units are counted as the overall obligation for the state and get divided up and given to nice suburban communities as their obligation. So if you have 37,000 new units of housing that's being built, and you're calculating a 20% set aside of affordable housing for that, you're now talking about 7,000 new units of affordable housing that has to go somewhere. It gets put into West Windsor, it gets put into Rivervale, New Jersey, it gets divvied up throughout the state. You also have certain environmental protections called the Highlands and preservation zones. Well, just because there are preservation zones where people can't build, the way this stuff gets calculated, guess what? You still have an obligation, but because you can't build it, we're going to divvy that up and give it to places that can build it. Once again, hitting all of the suburban communities. Now, where does this all become kind of a self-perpetuating cycle of hell that we're never going to get out of? One of the biggest drivers of unaffordability right now in the state is the fact that we have the highest property taxes. The high property taxes drives rentals up, it drives business costs up, and it drives up the cost of every person sitting in here, what your housing costs you. When I moved into Rivervale, New Jersey 14 years ago, my husband and I calculated what we could afford. We calculated what we could afford with mortgage. We calculated what we could afford with property taxes. I had lived in DC, London, New York. We chose to come back to New Jersey after we sat down and realized Westchester was insane for property taxes. Manhattan was becoming too expensive. So we said, let's move to Bergen County. and we did everything we were supposed to do. Well, this year, I have a 1960s old colonial house, maybe 3/4 acre of land, nice, it's not a McMansion, it's not, I think it's typical nice house. We hit $22,000 a year in property taxes this year. 22,000.
Where did you start?
11,700. My taxes now equal my mortgage payment. And I've been in the house for 14 years. We have had the discussion that if it goes up the way it's been going, we can't afford our house. We can't afford to stay in our house. We fall into the category of probably people right now where if you look at my total gross income and what we pay for property taxes, mortgage, insurance, I probably fall into the category of unaffordability on my home, which now creates additional obligations in the state of New Jersey. So we keep creating this cycle. And almost all of these projects being built, municipalities are being forced to give what is known as these pilot agreements, payment in lieu of taxes. And so to add insult to injury, they're coming into communities, they're saying, we're going to force you to allow us to build a 700-unit complex where you don't want it, and you're going to give us a tax break for 20 years or 30 years. What does that end up resulting in? And not to pick on Jersey City, but I'm going to. Jersey City, over the past decade, has exempted over 17% of its entire property tax base pursuant to pilot agreements. So what is that translated into? They have an artificially deflated property tax base. They have money not going to their public schools. So where does that money come from? The state of New Jersey, which comes from all the taxpayers in the other communities. So by their own admission, they are currently receiving over $100 million of aid that they're not entitled to, on top of the other aid that they get, because of these sort of formulas. Now, I mentioned Bergen County, most densely populated county and, bigger than multiple states, has almost 1 million people in it. 70 communities in Bergen County had been receiving, collectively, less money than the rounding error for Jersey City for its schools. Okay? My town right now, per student, receives $450 per year, including special needs per student. 70% of our property taxes are being paid to the school because we get no aid. We get nothing. So what has happened? My property taxes have gone from $11,000 to $22,000. And a lot of people in our communities are now deemed to be in need of affordable housing. So that now brings us to the categories of people who actually need it, and why. Seniors. The seniors in our communities are being priced out of their homes, even though they paid off their mortgages, because they can't afford their property taxes. So now they're looking for affordable housing. A couple of nuances on affordable housing for seniors that most people are unaware of. There's a lot of communities go, let's build it. Let's build it for the people in our community. Let's build senior housing. Guess what? You really can't. Because a couple of nuances. One, there's an artificial cap, where if you as a community build too much senior housing, you no longer get credit for it. It's as if it doesn't even count. So it doesn't count towards the obligations that you've been given. So you could build as much senior affordable housing as you wanted, and the Court of Fair Share Housing would look at it and go, no, it doesn't count. No, you got to start over. Number two, who do you think, God bless you, who do you think should have precedent in getting that affordable housing for seniors that's available in your community? You would think the person who's lived there for 50 years, has their friends, their family, their community center, their local shopping, you know, has rides to get back and forth to the doctor, let them age in place. No, it is illegal for a community to give preference to their own residents. And if you do, it no longer counts towards your affordable housing application. So, a lot of communities, once they hear that, they go, well, why are we doing this then? Next group of people who need it are the families who live in your community who are struggling. So, unexpected death of a loved one. I had a brain aneurysm a couple of years ago. I'm the primary breadwinner in my household. My biggest fear was not dying, because I knew if I died, my family would be taken care of. I had a couple of really good life insurance policies. My biggest fear was what happens if I survive and I'm not the same, and I can't go back to work, and I can't pay my $22,000 a year, property taxes. What happens to my kids who are in school? I have so many women who call my office on a regular basis because they're getting divorced. And they were just barely getting by to begin with, and are trying to find some place to live for them and their kids, for their kids to have some sort of continuity in their lives as the family's breaking apart, and not having to rip them out of the school system and their friends and everything else at the same time. Well, guess what? You can't give preference to them either. And if you had affordable housing in your community, you can't give it to the people in your community, such as the single mother with the 2 kids that I'm just speaking about. You have special needs. We have the highest rate of autism in the entire country. I go out and do a lot of Meals on Wheels type of programs in the community to see firsthand how people are struggling, what they're doing. The most shocking component of delivering Meals on Wheels for me was seeing seniors who are 80, 85, aging in place in their home, taking care of a disabled 50-year-old child. And their biggest fear and concern is, what's going to happen to my child once I'm gone? That's another category of people who desperately need it in our communities. But there's also an artificial cap on that. If you build more than a certain percentage of that, you don't get credit for it. Now we get to institutional poverty and generational poverty. And the reasoning behind why some of these original decisions had come down the pipe. And going back to 1975, there was a series of cases known as Mount Laurel that came through the New Jersey court system that found that a lot of municipalities engaged in exclusionary zoning practices to try to keep out people who weren't like them. We're now in 2018. I am a mother of a 6-year-old. I'm a mother of a 14-year-old. Any person who has walked into a kindergarten or first grade class in suburban New Jersey communities and looks around will see that exclusionary zoning practices really don't exist anymore. The blend of cultures, the blend of races, the blend of religions that I see in my children's first grade class, and in all the other kindergarten and first grade classes that I go into, shows that New Jersey is a much more integrated community than people think it is. 10 years ago, maybe not so much. 20 years ago, definitely not. But today, it has changed significantly. My son, his friends are full gamut. My street is a melting pot of every different religion, country. It has changed, and it has changed in New Jersey. So some of the original intent behind the Mount Laurel decisions has already organically occurred. But to deal with true poverty, how do we address that as we look at this? I'm going to use the example of Asbury Park, and then I'll also talk about Atlantic City. Asbury Park is an example of where things could have been done properly and were not. Remember how I talked about Jersey City having no affordable housing obligations? Any community that's deemed an urban aid community has no affordable housing obligations by the state of New Jersey. So if you are a community that's receiving aid in certain categories, you don't have to provide affordable housing. So what does that mean for a place like Asbury Park? Asbury Park has significant poverty. It has a failing school system. It has a school system in which only 66% of the kids actually graduate. And out of the kids who graduate, approximately 1 out of 2 need remedial math or English at a local community college if they go on. Take a wild guess what the state of New Jersey currently sends to Asbury Park per student per year. Take a guess. I told you about $455 in labor. $31,000 per year per student. The school is currently spending $35,000 per year per student. Now, during the same period of time, who's been to Asbury Park recently? Beautiful restaurants, happening nightclubs, multi-million-dollar, places on oceanfront. Okay, really nice community. Guess how many units of affordable housing, new stuff was built for the residents of Asbury Park as that was all taking place? 0. Okay. So, using Asbury Park as a pilot, said, you know what? We currently have the highest foreclosure rate in the country in New Jersey. In every suburban community, you have hundreds of homes sitting there empty. To educate a child in Asbury Park from preschool through 12th grade, figure a family with 2 kids, it's costing the state of New Jersey $955,000 over a 14-year period for a family with 2 children in a school system that is failing. My suggestion was, you know what, let's do something totally out of the box. Rather than destroy all of our communities by allowing rich developers to come in and build 80% market rate units, put a little set aside for affordable housing, and potentially crash our entire real estate market in the process. Why don't we do something novel and take a look at all of these empty foreclosed properties in good suburban areas and do a pilot? We give out tax credits to everybody. Let's work with the banks and the portfolios that own these properties. Let's do a partnership. State of New Jersey, you could pick up these homes for maybe $300,000, $400,000 for a really nice home in these communities. Do a pilot program. Offer families in the most distressed communities. Single moms struggling with 2 kids. Come up to Rivervale, New Jersey. Here's a home. A real home. Not a 600 square foot unit where you set aside and, you know, the separate core building, but a real home that you can live in with your children, go to an amazing school system, and the state of New Jersey in doing it, as I ran the numbers, with owning a house that this family lives in, would be saving over $300,000 over that 14-year period for that family. No, instead, what do? We just compound the problem. We refuse to embrace anything that may be different. We refuse to look at this in any way other than we must build on every last remaining piece of green space in this state. Now, I don't know about you guys. I can't get out of the car at night. It's like a Disney film on acid. I have coyotes, I have foxes, I have deer. I can't get out of my car sometimes because the number of animals that are around me, because they have no other place to go. We have the #1 designation for toxic sites, environmental mishaps, autism, we're running out of water. Oh, and guess what the courts can't look at in doing these decisions? Environmental issues. Okay? So everything is so upside down. Atlantic City, another example, similar to Asbury Park. Atlantic City, most people don't realize, have only 39,000 residents that live in Atlantic City. They were spending $1.5 million per month just on health benefits for their municipal employees. They had 1,000 full-time municipal employees in Atlantic City. They had $500 million in debt. Their municipal budget spend for a household of 4 people averaged $28,000 per household. And when you added in schools, a family of 4 people with 2 kids in the school system, Atlantic City was spending $78,000 per year per family. These are the sort of things that if we don't start looking in a more holistic approach and looking at better ways to address these sort of things, we are literally driving into disaster. And it's something that you guys have heard me tonight. I'm not saying that we shouldn't work to provide affordable housing for seniors, special needs, people who have had a transitional life event who may need it, our veterans desperately need it, and those who have lived in generational poverty, they need options as well. And what we've been doing in the state has been a cyclical thing that hasn't worked for anybody. And so, what do we do now? I said at the beginning, it's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue. I have Bernie Sanders delegates from Cranford, New Jersey, who love me, I think would come out and campaign for me because they see their community being destroyed. I have blue-collar communities that I represent, that people live maybe 50 by 75 foot lot, 1,100 square foot home, have 2 family members working full-time jobs, making maybe $40,000, $45,000 each, who are paying $12,000 a year in property taxes to be able to live in their 1,100 square foot home, and are now being told to add insult to injury that their community has to allow for hundreds of units of brand new luxury condos and apartments that won't be paying taxes and will be paying a fraction of what they have to pay. The average unit is maybe paying $1,100, $1,900 per year, depending upon the size of it, as compared to $11,000, $12,000 for a comparably sized home, and are being told that the last remaining parcel of farmland, the last remaining parcel of park in your community has to be developed. It makes no sense. So the only way to change it, the only way to help your communities, your mayors, your council, your people who have the guns to their heads, is to start speaking out as residents. Put pressure on us as legislators. Put pressure on us and say, please do your job. We have communities all over the state reaching out, saying, we don't know what to do. Peapack Gladstone, Milburn, Montville, Wayne, West Windsor, Delran, Deptford. I'm learning about all of these different places that I had never even heard the names of these towns. Reaching out and saying, please help us, please do something. And as we see in New Jersey, politicians, undue respect, with enough pressure, they get scared. With enough voices saying, can you move something forward, they'll take action. Right now, I have dear friends on the Democratic side of the aisle who have whispered in my ear and said, we don't want to be called the same things that you were called in the last election cycle. And it's understandable. I've developed alligator thick skin. I've heard I hate women. I'm like a Something About Mary, Chris Farley type movie where, allegedly I hate every different group that exists on this planet, including myself, my children, my husband, my cat. I've heard it all. And the one thing I've learned is you gotta have a backbone. And notwithstanding what insults get hurled your way, we are here for a purpose. And I made a commitment after seeing it firsthand and seeing how it doesn't work, both as a professional lawyer, a resident, and now a member of the legislature. We have to work together to provide a better and different way. So, initial steps, start supporting some of the legislative ideas that I'll put forth. They're baby steps, but they provide relief. They provide hope. They provide the ability for some sort of sanity to come to this discussion. And they include lifting the arbitrary caps on seniors and special needs. It includes allowing municipalities to give preference to their own residents so long as they meet the financial requirements that you have to prove in order to get into affordable housing. It enables courts, it enables professionals to take into account infrastructure, schools, resources, and more importantly, the environment. I yell at my environmentalist friends all the time, and I ask them if they've all developed narcolepsy. You know, they come down and they talk about this tax credit program or that tax credit program or this new form of renewable energy or this or that. And every time they do, I shame them. And I go, biggest environmental disaster occurring to the state of New Jersey in over 40 years, and you guys have remained silent. So you want to talk about, Teslas? Let's talk about the 100,000 extra cars that are going to be on the road. Now, what's that going to do? What's that going to do to our smog? And they look at me, and then they scurry away. But, those are the sorts of things that we have to continue putting pressure and, not letting people off the hook. It was interesting. The one thing that gives me hope is on this article today, DEP blocks Lakewood plan that foes fear with double population. We finally have Jeff Tittle, executive director of the New Jersey Sierra Club, said Lakewood's proposed changes would accelerate the township's already rapid growth with accompanying congestion, increased air pollution, and harmful runoff into the Barnegat Bay. This high-density plan could have added almost 100,000 people in an already overdeveloped area, making it the third largest city in New Jersey. You're talking the density of Jersey City of New Brunswick, or New Brunswick. Meanwhile, New Brunswick just got slammed with additional affordable housing obligations, and they've been silent on it. But, and then he goes into, if you go from 1 house per acre to 10 houses per acre, it's 10 times the density, but it's 100 times the water pollution. It's the first time in 2 years a statement's been made about any of the overdevelopment taking place by any of our environmentalists. So it's something that, we have a hard road ahead of us, but I know there's some questions, so I'll take some questions, and so.
Well, first of all, thank you for that. The problem with West Windsor and Princeton as Hopewell is that our residents are so well educated that these questions are the kind of questions, some of them that belong on TV shows to stump the host. So we'll try and go through a bunch of them, and you decide how much time you want to devote.
Okay.
So one of the things, this is I get to ask the first question, so I wrote it. So, one of the things I knew was that you had already sponsored a host of bills in the legislature. And of the bills that you authored or sponsored, which one would you hope would gain the most traction?
Well, I think, an easy one that should have already gained traction was establishing the Affordable Housing Obligation Study Commission, which was what I had talked about, bringing all of the people to the table so that we could have had, or we can have, discussions about how to do something on a state level. It makes no sense to be putting these obligations on individual communities. We need to look at an entire state planning approach. Millennials, they're looking for affordable housing. They want to be in Jersey City. They want to be in Weehawken. They don't want to be in the middle of nowhere that has one bar that stays open till 11 p.m. on a Friday night. Likewise with public transportation. If you have somebody who's commuting who needs public transportation because they can't even afford to maintain a car, And you're plopping them 30 miles from any mode of public transportation and making it a transit village. It's absurd. So, you know, that's some of the stuff that I was hoping could move forward and could move forward in a bipartisan fashion to at least get the discussion moving.
Now, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but we have one of your colleagues from across the aisle, and hopefully she'll, and that's Melinda Reynolds Jackson's here in the audience.
So that bill is A1639, and it was co-sponsored by Reed Gouchiard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here's another question, it's a tough one. Is there any possible remedy for a township that has, as a result of a recent court decision, and who signed agreements with developers, do they have any recourse?
What I have told every municipality that has entered into a settlement agreement is to put a catch-all provision that if something changes at the legislative level, that they have the opportunity to reopen whatever agreement was entered into. I mean, in the event that construction is already underway, that's one thing. But if you had, you know, a project that's sitting there but nothing's occurred that you had to enter into because you had a proverbial gun to your head, and the regs do change to the municipality's advantage, they should be able to renegotiate some of that stuff. One of the other bills, that, just going back for a second, that I'm hoping that we could really work together on as well, establishes a population-based cap for the obligations, so that no municipality would be forced to increase their housing stock by more than a certain percentage in any given round of us doing this. And I think that's very important because we do have communities right now that are seeing, you know, and being forced to have population increases of maybe 40%. And so one of the provisions in here is that all municipal adjustment of present and prospective fair share based upon population, available, vacant, and developable land has to include water supply and sewage capacities, school class size, school service considerations, public safety service considerations, public transportation and traffic considerations, as well as adequate water supply, sewage capacities, maintaining approximately the same school class sizes, adequate school facilities and resources, as well as you could never have an allocation of units to a municipality to exceed an amount that would result in an increase of its municipal population by more than 5% in a 10-year period. And that is something that I think would really afford the protections that's needed and would force the conversation to figure out how better to provide affordable housing within our state.
Is that the same bill number?
Now, this one is A1648.
Thank you.
I like this question. Please share your website.
Oh, it's www.holly, Schepisi, SCHEPISI.com. I'll even share my cell number. If anybody ever needs to reach out, I know. Don't abuse it, but if you need to reach me, it's 917-596-8943. And the 917, it was from my living in New York City days attending Fordham Law School, and I never gave the number up, so it's been my number for over 25 years.
Now, you may have already answered this question, but it's phrased a little differently, and maybe you can help educate those of us who are not well steeped in the law. What is it, what statute or ruling prohibits the courts from looking at the mitigating circumstances that you went through? I mean, why can't the courts take those things into account?
Under the rules and under the COA laws and some of the existing rulings, it's nonsensical. And that's why, from a legislative perspective, it's something whereby it's incredibly important for us to add it. But the current regs, which is PL 1985 C222 and Section 4 in particular, because it doesn't specifically lay those items out, the courts have read it to specifically exclude those things from being able to be taken into consideration.
I'm sorry, what is law?
It's PL 1985 C.222, and it's
What's the amount of law?
it's Section 4 of Public Law 1985, and it's okay.
This is a provocative question. If you come from West Windsor, you know that this one is one that animated the town. Can our town council pass a resolution in support of your legislation?
This is a great one because it's the most surreal part of what I have done over the past couple of years. My own law partners represent municipalities. I found out that in closed session, they were providing advice to municipalities not to support my stuff for fear of retribution. And it's something that I can't tell you how many municipalities in their closed session meetings with their attorneys have been advised to not openly support what I am doing and to wait until they have a settlement in place so that they don't get harmed or retaliated against.
By the court? By whom?
By fair share housing and the special masters, and that as a result, they should remain silent and not say anything.
Who is this fair share housing? Who are they? What made them
They
so
are
powerful?
a nonprofit that got involved in bringing the original lawsuit against the Mount Laurel and were involved in the Mount Laurel decision. They are a nonprofit. They do some good, but they also have significant conflicts in that they are coming in and being given significant power by the courts to force the hand of municipalities to have to rezone or do eminent domain or build under threats of really bad litigation and outcomes, which gives the developers, a lot of strength in these negotiations, but yet fair share is funded through donations by the very same developers. And when municipalities have tried to fight back and have said in court, we want to do discovery, we want to know who's funding fair share, we want to know certain things, we want to be able to take depositions, do interrogatories. The courts have said, no, you're not entitled to that as a municipality. But you as a municipality now have to pay fair share's legal fees.
What?
Yes. It's so upside down and backwards. So the only way I know who some of the donors are is actually by going on Fair Share's website and looking to see who they've thanked. And so, it's something where it's a broken system. So I disagree with not doing a resolution, obviously, and I've had a lot of communities who have done resolutions, but I also understand that we have a lot of legal advice to municipalities telling them, don't do it, it's going to hurt you. Now, the municipalities are already being hurt. They need to start fighting back. And so...
Just a housekeeping issue. We have the room till 9. I think we'd like to continue with our Q&A. I want to carve a little bit of time out before the session ends so I can put our mayor on the spot. And he's here now in the audience. And he can tell us what West Windsor is doing about affordable housing in light of the ruling from Judge Jacobson. So let me continue with a couple more questions, if it's okay with you.
Absolutely.
And in about 10 minutes, we'll put Hemant on the spot. This is a question I've heard asked a bunch of times. What happens, and I don't know what happens if a town ignores the court and the court order to build affordable units? I mean, what's the practical consequence?
The practical implications of ignoring the court order is you no longer have any zoning ordinances, and it becomes a Wild West in your community. You have no control over anything that could be built. And so it's something that, philosophically is very tempting. There are communities that are being hit so hard that they go, essentially, screw it. What are they going to do to us? Not realizing that the alternative is actually even worse than you could ever imagine. And one of the things I would like to ultimately see is doing a constitutional amendment which eliminates the builder remedies.
Here, here.
And allow the people of the state of New Jersey, and not outside building interests from other states and a whole host of different special interest groups, to dictate what happens. And allow the people to decide and come out and vote on this. And that's something I'm pushing for pretty hard.
You already have the floor.
It is.
Can it be added to our elections? It will be election in the summer. Can it be added as a special question?
It could absolutely go on as a ballot question. It is Assembly Concurrent Resolution number 79. You're welcome.
Here's one that takes it out of the state hands, but it's a question that I heard, and hopefully you get some insight, advice. Are there possible remedies at the federal level in the courts or in Congress?
One of the suggestions of actually, and I love him because he's just one of the most down-to-earth individuals you would ever meet. Captain Milshingham, who's a Hackensack River keeper. And when a lot of people, for political reasons, were told, don't come out, don't support her stuff, be quiet, we're going to take her out this election, he didn't care. And he stepped up and he said, no, and he's as liberal a Democrat as you could get, very environmentally friendly, everything. And he actually called me a hero at an event that I walked into, because he said I was the only one willing to take on this fight and try to protect our environment while we still could. And he said that there are environmental components that we should start fighting on the federal angle in the event that the legislature continues to refuse to move anything forward. So that's something that I'm going to talk to him in more depth about. I've also been talking to the, and having preliminary discussions with conservation trust groups and a whole bunch of other people to see if maybe we can start banding together and protect what remains. Because the worst part of all of this, you're all sitting here right now, and what's going to happen in West Windsor over the next couple of years, it's going to change your community quite a bit. But guess what? As soon as you're done, you start all over, and it's as if it never occurred. And so whatever settlements are being entered into, it's all fictional type of stuff, because your obligation never goes away. And so you're still being left with, what, 1,000 1,500 affordable housing units that you still haven't built. And guess what? 9 years goes by really quickly. You're going to be facing the exact same issue before you can even blink. And, communities get targeted. There are communities up by me that were absolutely targeted, and others that were given the pass. And the ones that were given the pass are going, phew, thank God it wasn't us. We're not going to get into the middle of this mess. Until I point out to them, guess what? You have 3 shopping malls in your community. And shopping malls are kind of going the way of the dinosaur. So we have blue laws in Bergen County. No stores can be open because they don't want traffic on Sundays. So imagine the traffic. If those malls go under and all of a sudden you have, Trump Tower 12 there. So people are not thinking to the future. Our municipal officials are literally treading water and trying to just survive through this cycle. And, it's very easy to kind of punt it down the road, but it's something that will never go away if we don't start addressing it.
I know you've addressed this question, but it's come up twice since we've started collecting questions, so I think I'm going to ask it again.
Sure.
And if I can distill it down, it's why won't the legislature act on affordable housing?
Honestly, I think it's a blend of not understanding what's going on because it is so complicated, and being scared of being called really bad things like I have.
Yeah. There's also people that give them money to run for the office.
Yes.
And that's the situation.
No, and the lobby groups
Yes.
are significant.
Exactly right.
I was trying to be as apolitical
Yes, you
as
were.
possible
That's quite all right.
and gracious,
That's quite all
but yes, you do have people whose
Yes.
interests are bought to ensure that no change takes place because there's a lot of big money in this.
That's right.
A lot of big money. And some very politically connected people who are driving this process, who have the ownership interest in the builders and the development and the consulting firms. It's big money.
But the building remedy is pretty recent, like within 25 years, right?
1975.
One of the points you just touched on was another question raised by the audience. And who are the lobbyists that are pressuring the majority of the legislature to stay clear of the solution? And they're folks who put this one together assuming it's the building.
It's a blend. It's some of the liberal think tanks. It's some of the builders. It's a wide variety. I mean, you want to talk upside down? You have a Republican member of the legislature who represents builders and does land use and is a lawyer and, free economy thinking person who's out here fighting against, the very thing that you would think Republicans were pushing. And I'm fighting, screaming, our environment, we gotta protect things, our water, our children, And the people fighting me are my Democratic colleagues saying, no, we can't change this. And so I think that it's gone beyond kind of philosophical at this point. I was shocked. I had a particular organization that had never spoken to me, never met with me. I had reached out to them probably 4 or 5 times. First sat down to talk about some of the alternate type of programs and distressed communities that I was thinking about doing, wanted to get their support, wanted to talk to them about it. I had an op-ed piece put into the Bergen Record that said I was a racist and a xenophobe, and that I didn't want those people living in my backyard. Now, what makes the letter that much more appalling and I never publicly divulged this, was at the time, half of my household who was living with me was a displaced family from the Caribbean, who I view as family, who I rescued after their island had been destroyed, welcomed them into my home as my own family, put the children in school to go to school with my kids as one big blended family. As I had to come home and at dinner sit at the table and go, hey guys, just want to give you a heads up. In the paper, I'm being accused of being a racist, and I don't want those people in my backyard. And the look of shock on everybody's face at the dinner table was, no, you just want them in your home. So that's unfortunately the go-to right now for a lot of different groups that are receiving donations and payments and whatever to keep the status quo. And that's something that's a hard thing to break. New Jersey has been doing the same thing the wrong way for 40 years. Now, so it's going to take all of us willing to kind of stand up together and go, you know what, we may not agree on every facet of this, but we agree that what's currently being done is probably not the best thing for our state. And let's figure out and brainstorm together how to get it done in a better, more manageable way.
With that note, we're going to raise a question for our mayor, because we just had a decision by Judge Jacobson. And Yvonne, can you please update us on what West Windsor is doing with affordable housing?
First, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reynolds Jackson, for coming. This is 2 days in a row. This rate you have to move here. We need somebody to represent our town anyway. We don't have anybody either at the county or the state level. So I'll also like to acknowledge, there are 4 council members here. They're sitting in a row, so that's not a caucus. Virginia Manzari, Alison Miller, who is the council president, Linda Jeevas, and Jyotika Bari. So you mentioned about being picked on. Our town is being picked on. We offered to try to settle with the Fair Share Housing Center, and they told us they are not interested. I wrote an op-ed piece in the Trenton Times, and I was told, oh, you shouldn't write that, they will pick on you. I mean, I generally say I don't get into fights, but if I get into a fight, I fight it with all zest. I mean, I'll fight it till as long as... This kind of thing doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I mean, our town has spent $300,000 last year, $200,000 this year, just on lawyers. Yeah. And I always say that I'm a Hindu, so I believe in reincarnation. So,
I will not come back as a cockroach.
No, next life, I'm going to be born as a affordable housing lawyer in New Jersey. That's a guaranteed employment contract. And not a single house is being built. And that's absolutely a shame. I mean, nobody is against affordable housing. Nobody is saying I don't want this person or that person in my backyard. But all the money is going to the lawyers and the court. And in our case, we had a long trial because the Fair Share Housing Center wanted to make us an example, didn't want to settle with us. So we had a long trial. The judge made, we and Princeton didn't settle for some other reason, but the judge made us and Princeton pay the cost of an independent expert to come up with a number. Our number was very low. Fair Share Housing said 1976. So the judge appointed an independent expert to come up with a number and then ignored the number anyway. And then gave us a number. The independent expert came up with a number around 1,000 and we were given a number 1,500. Why make us pay for an expert? I mean, I need my money back. Yeah. Because
in fairness to the mayor, one of the things that we have seen throughout the state is the inconsistency of the approach, where literally you could stand on one foot, turn around 3 times, spin a wheel, spend $400,000 on experts and be told, okay, we picked this number out of the sky. So it's a tough place to be.
I mean, at least don't make us pay for the expert. I mean, it's just, so I mean, legislature, whatever you can do, and everybody off the camera will promise that this is a top issue. Lieutenant Governor, I went to the mayor's conference and I speak my mind. I mean, I don't care. If you want to pick on me, pick on me. I mean, I have the luxury, if I get fed up, I can move out of state. A lot of people don't have that luxury, right? So this legislature can simply stop this nonsense tomorrow by just telling the court, stop the bleeding, right? Let us come up with an approach where the money is given to build a house, not to the lawyer. And fair share housing center has no incentive to settle. I mean, these 2-3 towns, they can beat us up. I mean, we are in bad shape. Look at South Brunswick. I mean, it's absolutely insane what is being done to them. And nobody in this state feels that the judge who ruled on that retired on December 29th and on January 4th came to the same court as a developer's attorney. Nobody sees anything wrong in that?
He's now a partner in the development firm.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
Share
what is
about that.
what is
About that, like, whatever.
what is going on? I mean, the thing is going on is they will just come election time, they'll say, oh, he's for Trump, he's for Christie, while I don't do anything, right? That's the kind of labels they use. Until the common person wakes up and says, unless you do something for me, whether you are Democrat, Republican, tall, short, black, white, yellow, I don't care. Right? I need solutions. I don't need talk.
Right.
Talk is very I'm not running for any election. I'm just fed up. And at some point, a common person is going to say, enough is enough. And everybody who is thinking they are skating through, one day they are going to find another Trump in New Jersey and they will wonder what happened. What happened because you sat on your duff and didn't do a thing. When a common person was getting, I don't want, because I'm on camera, but that is what is happening. I mean, the common person, affordable housing person cannot afford to live in West Windsor if the taxes double overnight because we are adding 2,000. I just came back from a school board presentation. The superintendent was showing numbers. And even without affordable housing ruling, we are adding 2,000 dwellings. Right? I call dwellings because it's apartment, condos, everything. We have 10,000 currently. If you add 20% to our township, New Jersey is not as desirable for 20% people to move in downtown. I mean, the state is growing maybe at 1 or 2%, 3%, we are losing population. Where are these people going to come from? And when I came here in 94, the economy was bad and some of the builders had gone under. And I just tell, look, I will give all of you permission at the same time. Go build, fight each other, kill each other. Most of you are going to go bankrupt. Right? But that is what is happening and it's absolutely nonsense. And I really appreciate you coming down here and you putting pressure that something absolutely needs to be done. And first thing is to stop the bleeding. Stop this nonsense where just the numbers are being picked out of hat without any sense of reality. What is doable, what is not doable in town. I mean, the traffic is crazy right now. You put 2,000 more homes now, you can't get here. So, he called me to other thing we have done and which we are hopeful for. The original fair share housing legislation said that in any given round, no town should be required to build more than 1,000 units. Now our cap is 1,500. So we have appealed to the judge and the hearing is on May 24th that she should respect the law and reduce our number to the cap as mandated by the legislation. Now the question is whether the judge is going to respect the law or make the law and say this doesn't count. Because the judge in South Brunswick said it doesn't count. Right? So then don't pass the law.
And there's profiting from result.
And it's as the law is as plain as it can be that no municipality should be required to build more than 1,000 homes. I mean, it's as I'm not, English is not my first language, but I can tell that what it means. So I'm hopeful that when we go and argue in front of the court on May 24th, the judge will pay attention to that. So that's the first step. But we could use any help we can get from the legislation, any help whatsoever. So again, thank you everyone for coming.
I will be speaking at the New Jersey Conference of Mayors down in Atlantic City Thursday into Friday. I'm being honored as Assemblywoman of the Year by the conference on Thursday night. Friday, I'll be sitting on a legislative panel with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle as well to talk about affordable housing, school funding, all of these hot-button issues. And it'll give an additional opportunity to beg and plead and cajole my friends to start paying attention to this. So.
Well, tonight we're fortunate in that in our audience, we have folks that are sitting on town council from Hamilton, from West Windsor. I think there's someone from Hopewell as well. I don't know if there's anybody who came from Robbinsville, but the point of it is, we have ex-mayors here as well. The point of it is that we have people with the talent, the energy, and the wherewithal to help fight this battle. And with your energies, and with Holly's energies, let's try and make a difference. So again, thank you all for coming.
In fact, I have a sign-in sheet if you want copies of any of my bills emailed to you to be put on a mailing list of additional information on this. I also have my cards back there for anybody.
Right, and there are a couple of candidates who are going to be running in November from both sides of the aisle here tonight. So if you have any questions, please seek them out.